So what I'm going to talk about is basically change notifications with Graph API. So what are change notifications per se? So what is a change notification? What's Graph API? And then how can we sync Microsoft 365 and Dataverse together? So essentially, when we create bookings in Outlook, so like an appointment like this is, how can we sync that over to Dynamics on Dataverse, and then from Dataverse sync back to Outlook? So just a few words about me. First off, I want to turn this off. Let's see if I can, yes, on the first. My record number of clicks to make that disappear is, I think, 22. Now it went away on the first one, so that's a huge success. So my name is Antti, come from Finland, work for Forward Forever. I'm a BizApps MVP, basically focused primarily on Microsoft's. Well, let's put it this way. I'm a CRM guy at heart. So my background is with Dynamics CRM, and sort of my niche especially is with Microsoft's project operations, which is the evolution of project service automation, and project for the web, as well as Microsoft's Power Automate, and specifically Flow with that. So for this session, what I do want to kind of emphasize is this has two levels to it. The slides that I'm going to go through are fairly straightforward, and they're more like an overview and overview slides and things that'll kind of, allow you to and get you to become aware of what is Graph API change notifications and these things. The end of the slides, where I cover some kind of gotchas, so some known issues and some kind of findings that I made, those and the demo are definitely advanced deep dive. So this is sort of partly basic and partly very advanced deep dive. And I will have to go through this extremely fast. So try to keep up. This is going to be very, very intense because we only have about 20 minutes. I'm going to steal maybe 5 minutes of your time, so 25 minutes.
That's fine.
But because I know I can't do this in 25. That's just doesn't. It's impossible. But so let's kind of get started. So the agenda today is what is Graph API? How can we use it? Now, what are change notifications? And what can we do with change notifications? And then I'm going to cover, before I do the demo, I'm going to cover lessons learned, just so that I don't have to jump back to the slide deck. And then I'm going to do a pretty, as extensive as a demo that I can. The demo itself could take an hour, I kid you not. So I'll show as much as I can. But kind of showing these things will build awareness more than I think the slides. And also what I do want to emphasize is what I've created here is a concept. It's not a finished framework, or it's not a finished product. It is a concept. And I have some, in those lessons learned slides, you'll kind of understand why what I've done is not a concept and what it requires to make this actually, I'd say, like production ready. So our goals and requirements, what are we trying to do? So we have two different systems. We have Outlook and we have Dynamics 365. And what we want to do is, when we create a booking in Outlook, and our scenario here is that I am a field technician. I am a field technician and I am scheduled on a work order to go and fix a customer's washing machine, for example. So when a scheduler books me in Dynamics 365 and what's known as a booking is created, that booking gets synced to my personal Outlook calendar, so that I can, on my mobile, look at my Outlook and realize that, okay, so I have a new appointment at this time, and the address is blah blah blah. You get the idea. And what I also want to do is, as a field technician, when that customer calls me and says, hey, you know what, I'm running 30 minutes late, can we push our meeting by 30 minutes? I don't have to call that scheduler, but I can see my agenda on my mobile phone, and I could just drag and drop or move that booking in Outlook, push that forward by 30 minutes, and that gets reflected in Dynamics 365. Why am I doing this? In the past, about a few years ago, it used to be possible to sync bookings between Dynamics and Outlook. Because of platform constraints, that was taken away, so that's not natively possible anymore. So out of the box, Microsoft doesn't have anything to sync, these two systems together. There are some concepts, some new concepts as well for field service, but really like a two-way booking sync is just like, it doesn't exist. There are some ISV solutions. So that was a nice challenge, and I decided that, I want to kind of see what we can do to make these work. So that's sort of the scenario that we're working on. So what is Graph API? Let's start with that, because that's one of those building blocks. So essentially, Graph API is a world of APIs on the Microsoft 365 side of things. So with Graph API, we can access things such as, Excel, Delve, bookings, Planner, SharePoint, Business Central, even Windows 10 stuff. So Graph API essentially opens the doors to the world of Microsoft 365 so that we can create, update, delete data in the world of Microsoft 365. That's Graph API in a nutshell. There are different ways in which we can use Graph API. If you're getting started with it and you just kind of want to explore it, the Graph Explorer is a fantastic tool. So you can do things like get your own profile, get your own mailbox, get your own photos, stuff like these, and just play around with Graph Explorer and see what is hypothetically and theoretically possible to do at a larger scale. We can also use Graph API in Postman to try our get, post, patch commands, see what works, what doesn't, more on an organizational level, I'd say, than with Graph Explorer. Then, of course, when we actually implement the solutions, we can use Power Automate, Logic Apps, or Azure Functions. And what I've done for this example is I've naturally used Power Automate because I don't have a developer background. I don't even write HTML. So the solution of my choice is Power Automate, which is very clear in my message how I emphasize the end results and what we can do with what we're doing. Now, just kind of as an example, popular API requests using Graph API are something like get my manager, get my mail, get my profile, get my files, these kinds of things. Get users in my group or organization, and so on and so on. So these kind of give you an idea of what are some of the most popular requests that Graph API is used for. All right, so what are change notifications then? So in essence, a change notification is, it's a Graph API uses a webhook mechanism that it uses to deliver change notifications to different clients. So you could think of, like, in the simplest of terms, you could think of change notifications as your UPS delivery person, delivery girl, delivery guy, delivery person. So what UPS does is, they arrive at your door, they ring your doorbell, ding dong, you have a package, right? They're delivering a package to you. So you could say that change notifications are a way of delivering a package on your door that you will then receive, and you'll do whatever you like with your package. And that, you taking that package through your door is you running your own logic and doing whatever the heck you want to do with it. So the way change notifications are used is you subscribe to a change notification. You subscribe to some sort of resource on Microsoft 365. For example, Outlook events, the event resource, you subscribe to that. And then what you do is you accept that, you make that subscription request, and then you accept that subscription. And essentially how it then in real life works is when you create a new event in your Outlook, so an event is equal to an appointment or a meeting or whatever it is you create in Outlook. That's an event resource in Outlook that you create. When you create an event, a change notification is received. So think of this as you order something online, a change notification is received that UPS driver says, "Oh, okay, I'm going to deliver your package." He receives it. He or she receives it. UPS receives it. They accept it. All right, so let's start the delivery. And then they come over to your door. They ring your doorbell. They bring your package. And then that's the custom logic is then after that change notification is accepted, that custom logic runs, and you do whatever you want with it. So what can we do with change notifications? There's a good track on Learn about this. I'd suggest you go, you'll go do it. We can do things like, react to SharePoint list items, react to chat messages, set our team's presence, react to do tasks, react to conversations, messages, events, all sorts of things. So when something happens, there's a reaction. There's an action and a reaction. So before we jump in the demo to kind of, show you how does this then actually work, I'm going to cover these lesson learned things. And on this slide, you're going to see a lot of, you might be like, what's he talking about? This is, I'd say, extremely advanced topics. So you just kind of have to know them. I'm not going to explain these because we'd be spending 2 hours going over these concepts. First off, this is a pro code approach, should be a pro code approach when you do this in production. Do not consider low code for this. And the reason for that is when we work with Dataverse, especially when we work with Dataverse, emphasis on Dataverse. When we work with Dataverse, what we want to leverage what we need to leverage is something that's the event framework. And we need something that's called the event execution pipeline that controls the logic that we run. And I'll give you a concrete example when we go through the demo. So that's one thing. And we can't control Power Automate is not aware of the event framework and vice versa. It's asynchronous. It does not respect that. Azure Functions, it can. Another thing is be extremely mindful of throttling. If you think of a scenario where you have 2,000 field technicians and you create 2,000 bookings in Dynamics, and those get synced to Outlook, and you have Power Automate running in between. And there's a caveat to this. Your flows are going to start throttling pretty soon. The more updates you make, the more throttling you're going to see. It's not the easiest way, and I'm not even sure, to be honest, how you do it to control throttling and natively in Power Automate. It can be done with Azure Functions, so you can kind of live on the edge and make sure your connectors don't throttle. Then one thing that's specific again to throttling and to the whole concept is the way bookings work in Dynamics. When you create multi-day bookings, so what I mean by multi-day is a booking for a week or a booking for a month, not to mention a year, you actually get several records. So if I was on as an example, if I was on a project and I was booked on a project, what would happen in Dynamics is we would get about over 200 individual records for bookings. And as we're syncing those records to Outlook and vice versa, that would create 200 for one project that I am on, that would create 200 bookings in Outlook, which would make this just not a usable concept anymore. So this is sort of like a hard gap requirement that we do need to consider when we're working on, especially with PSA and project operations. This concept does not work with those tools. It just doesn't. It's just like, don't try to shove it down those applications. It's not going to work. So field service with simple bookings is something we can work off on. Then there's some sorts of, all kinds of fun things that I ran into. And some of these things are, I was learning these, ended up spending a ton of time going through these. I'm using something that's known as extensions, open extensions. Open extensions don't support OData filtering. So we have to make additional refinements to our logic because of that. And then again, I would have wanted to use schema extensions, but they only work with delegated permissions. I did not want to go through that custom connector route. Because I wanted to keep this as low code as possible, and I think custom connectors are too much to pro code. Resource data is not supported for the event resource. That's something that'll, if you do this, you're going to look at, hey, let's use resource data. No, it's not supported. So again, you have to come up with workarounds. And then there are some things such, with the event resource, such as sometimes a post to event resource that uses open extensions simply fails. It just does not work every time. I've not had the chance to open a support request for that yet. It just doesn't work. So you have to factor really like cryptic and infrequent failures in your posts into consideration, into that logic that you're going to build to make this work. So those are some of the kind of the caveats and those lessons learned that I have had doing these. So what I'm going to do now, if I have about 15 minutes, is I'm going to jump in and I'm going to look at, we're going to look at creating those change notification subscriptions. So I actually need another tab. So let's hop here and go to bookable resources. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna subscribe to change notifications. And the way I've done it is I've built it on resources in Dynamics. So let's hop over to John Doe's bookable resource card or form, row, whatever it is these days. And let's look at this specific column that says sync with Exchange. So what I've created here is I've created a means of subscribing to change notifications from Dynamics. And we can see that John Doe, he is getting change notifications. So for the sake of example, let's make that as not allowed. And this is the first example of why the event framework, why we want to do that. When we change values in Dynamics, I could just change this and smash this record and save this record and fire off my flow as many times as I want, and that would most likely eventually screw up the subscription unsubscription to change notifications. So with the event framework, what I want to do here is I'd actually want to make sure that before this process has run, do not allow me to change this value. So I would use the event framework for this and run this with a combination of maybe JavaScript and Azure functions, so that I couldn't do what I'm doing right now to be able to change these back and forth. So that's one pro code kind of approach to this. But if we now look at how those change notifications work, subscribe and unsubscribe from change notifications, we'll see that 56 seconds ago a flow ran successfully. So what that flow did is it just got some of that basic data, got the user ID from the Azure Active Directory object ID of the user, and so on and so on. And then what it did is it looked at do I want to subscribe to or unsubscribe to change notifications? And as we're unsubscribing, what it did is it fetched all the subscriptions that user John Doe had against the event resource. Now, one thing that's super important here is you can make as many subscriptions to a change, to a single resource as you want, and that again will cause your logic to blow up. So you need to make sure that you only have a single subscription to a resource per user. That is that it has to be like that. And then essentially this flow says subscription exists, delete that subscription. And the same would happen if I went back to John Doe and said subscribe to change notifications, so that it would be kind of more complicated than this. What actually happens is there is a validation. So one does not simply just subscribe to change notifications. So when we subscribe to change notifications, there is a validation process that runs that it's a valid subscription request. And we do have to dissect and kind of handle that validation as well. And for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to show that because I only have 10 minutes, but just be aware that there is a validation process that needs to happen. I do have a blog post created about it, so you should be able to read it from my blog, Day-to-Day Dynamics 365. It's change notifications part 1. So when those change notifications are when we've subscribed to those, the next thing that we want to do is make sure that those change notifications stay up to date. Change notifications to the to the event resource expire every just under 4 days. It's in minutes, and I forget the exact number of minutes, how many thousand it is, but it expires every just under 4 days. So what we need to do is we have to have a recurring flow or logic, whatever you want to build it on, that runs before the subscription expires and renews that subscription. And these moving parts, these variables are, there's good articles out there in the community. These are sort of the hardest parts to wrap your brain around. They're not impossible, but those are sort of, you have to understand these things before you're able to use change notifications and proceed with them. They're not just something like boom and let's just make it work. They do take some thinking and consideration before you can leverage them. But once you have that in place and once you've tried it once and you've made it work, the world's your oyster and you can do really, really cool stuff with these. So for the remainder, like for the remaining 10 minutes, now that we've kind of covered how we subscribe to change notifications and how we can set a resource in Dynamics to be applicable for change notifications, what we're going to do next is we're going to create a booking and we're going to sync that booking to Outlook. So I am here on a work order in Dynamics and in field service. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a booking. So I am a scheduler and I have a work order and I'm going to schedule a technician for this break fix incident. And I'm just going to do it from the bookings subgrid plus create a new bookable resource booking and PowerUp demo 2. The name of the booking I think changes, or it's not going to be this in my Outlook, so I'll just name it like this. And I'm going to create it for tomorrow. And let's create it for, I might have another booking that contradicts with this, so let's make it from 9 a.m. to 10. Let's make it for me, and it is scheduled. And before I press save and close, pay attention to these. Event ID for booking sync and original resource. These are custom columns that I've added on the bookable resource booking table. And I will explain those very briefly. So now that my work order is created, let's hop over to, this flow right here. Now, if the post to the event resource fails, then it'll fail. This is where it'll fail. So if I won't see that booking here, I do. So now it didn't fail. So what happened is that booking created an event in my Outlook. So this isn't change notifications just yet. This is just basic, Power Automate automation. So if we dissect this flow really quickly, we can see that this flow runs on 2 different criteria. It runs whether a booking has been created, and it runs whether a booking has been updated. And what we're doing on the create side is, we're doing the basic fetch this resource, fetch this work order, booking status, blah, blah, blah. And then we're creating an event in, my calendar. And what we're doing is we're using this is where open extensions kick in. So we're using a concept called open extensions. So we're extending the resource that we have, out of the box, the event resource. We're extending that resource with what's known as open extensions. We're creating an extension to it. And to that extension, we're adding the GUID, global unique identifier, something like that, of the record that we just created, that booking record. We're adding its identifier to the event so that we can match that event with a specific booking in Dynamics. And that is something we definitely need to do if we want to keep those 2 things in sync. All right, so I have 5 minutes. So we created that booking. Now, the next thing that we want to do is, now that we have that booking in there, I am a field technician, I know that I'm scheduled for Friday, and now the customer calls and says, "Hey, Antti, I'm running late by an hour. Is there any chance we could push our meeting an hour into the future?" So what I say is, yeah, naturally, that's fine. I'm free. We can push it forward. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over to my calendar, and I will edit this event, and I will change it from 10 to 11, and I'm going to click on save, and it gets, it gets changed. In Outlook, I did have some problems with this last week. I found a small bug, so let's hope it goes through. It went through in my previous session, so I'm confident it goes through here as well. So what happens here is this is where change notifications kick in. So this is UPS. UPS is saying, ding dong, hey, I have a package for you. I just, you subscribed to something. I have a subscription, and I made something in the event resource. So UPS says, hey, here's your package. Here's your change notification. So what happens is this specific flow has when an HTTP request is received trigger, and my change notification is delivered. And this is that validation path that I was talking about. And then what I need to do is I need to respond to Graph API and say, hey, this is genuine. This is actually something that should, go through. There's like a client state matching for security things and all these things. So it's a proper request. And then what happens is there's a switch type that I've made. Brief explanation of this switch type was that I thought that we can subscribe to different types of change notifications: created, updated, deleted. I thought that I could, build a nice switch for different, logic that runs. It ends up that the event resource is a bit tricky. When I create an event, so I do a post, the resource itself updates itself several times. So for a single post to the event resource, I get up to 4 updates. That's just like so cryptic. It's extremely voodoo, but that's just how it works. And that's where we get into throttling. A single booking just caused flow to fire off 4 times. If you do this for 2,000 technicians, good luck. You got to control your throttling. You need a pro code approach for that, or so I argue. So we always get that update. So that actually means that what do we get? We get an infinite loop because we're doing updates. So we need to carefully control the outcome so that those updates that fire off don't mess with our logic. But for now, what the update did is look whether or not that event was deleted. If it's deleted, then we need to run a child flow to cancel or delete that booking in Dynamics. However, it was not deleted, it was edited. So we run a child flow to edit that matching booking in Dynamics. And if we go to Dynamics, I think I changed the booking from 10 to 11. Yes. So if we hop over to Dynamics, where's my Dynamics? Right here. If we hop over to Dynamics, what we'll see is this booking is now from 10 to 11. Time zones are not factored in because that's a painful world of its own just for the sake of this example. So I've not, they are as they are, but it changed from 10 to 11. And what do we have here? Now we can actually see something concrete right here. We have that event ID. So when I created that booking, it created the event. It created the event with the open extension of this booking, and what it does is it stores the original resource. So this is the GUID. This is the GUID of me. I think this is my Azure AD object ID. Why do I need that? I need that because if I change my resource, bookings can change. Maybe John Doe does my booking instead of me. What does that mean? Change in bookings means that I need my calendar has to get, the booking has to go away from my calendar. It has to be deleted. And it has to be posted in John Doe's calendar if that's the changed resource. So we need, the notion of and the reference to the original resource so that we can change resources, bookings, and then reflect that in their calendars. So what happened when that booking was created is that event was created in Outlook, And then from that, an update fires off, and an update then actually updates this bookable resource booking because a change notification is fired off. It updates this specific column with the ID of the event resource, and this is how we have a match. On the event resource, we have the GUID of the booking, and on the booking, we have the ID of the event resource. And with this, we can just shuffle them around as we please. And that is it.